They bullied at the black girl until they learned her dad was a famous combat veteran. The slap of the lunchbox hitting the pavement echoed through the morning air, louder than the engine hum of the yellow school bus. Naomi Carter stood frozen on the sidewalk, her chest tight as ketchup oozed from the cracked container at her feet. The laughter that followed wasn't the kind you forget. It stung. Deep, cruel. Brooklyn Wade, the ringleader with glossy blonde hair and an entitled smirk, stood triumphantly on the bottom bus step. "Told you, charity case, that seat isn't for people like you." Naomi blinked fast, willing the tears not to come. She didn't flinch. She wouldn't. Not today. A few kids gasped, most just watched. One boy even pulled out his phone, filming her standing there, fists clenched, food splattered on her shoes. The bus driver, a leathery-faced man with headphones in one ear, didn't bother to look back. Brooklyn climbed onto the bus like she'd won something, tossing her golden braid behind her shoulder. "Let's go. I'm not gonna be late because some wannabe tried to sit up front." The bus jerked forward, leaving Naomi behind in the cold wind. She didn't cry. Not there. Not where they wanted her to. She picked up the crushed lunchbox, brushed the grass off her jeans, and walked to school. It had started a week ago. Naomi, new to Northbridge Middle School, had quietly taken an empty window seat at the front of the bus on her first day. She didn't know it was some sort of unspoken throne for Brooklyn and her friends. She didn't care. But Brooklyn cared. A lot. "You don't belong up here," she had hissed the second day, after pushing past Naomi's shoulder. "This isn't a free ride for people like you. Go sit in the back." Naomi had looked her dead in the eye and said, "I have a bus pass just like everyone else." That was enough to make her a target. The whispers started in the hallways. "She's on welfare. Her dad's locked up. Her mom works nights at a gas station." Kids repeated it like it was fact, as if Naomi's silence confirmed everything. The truth was, Naomi didn't talk about her family, because she was told not to. At home, her mom, Vanessa, would always say the same thing. "We don't need to prove anything to anyone. Let them talk." But this felt different. She walked into homeroom and sat down at the far corner, ignoring the stares. Lucas Myers, the only kid who ever smiled at her, passed her a folded napkin. "You okay?" he whispered. Naomi gave him a tight nod. "I saw what they did. I told Mr. Everett." Naomi looked up sharply. "You told a teacher?" "Yeah. I mean, he saw some of it, I think." Her voice dropped. "They won't do anything." Lucas didn't respond. He just looked down, ashamed. He was right not to argue. Naomi had learned quickly that this school had its own rules, its own food chain. Brooklyn Wade's mom sat on the school board. Her father was a local congressman. She wasn't just a bully, she was legacy, protected, untouchable. That afternoon, Naomi found her locker spray-painted. "Know your place." She stood staring at it as the bell rang. The janitor passed by, sighed, and said nothing. No one did. At dinner, Vanessa made spaghetti and tried to act like everything was normal. Naomi stared at her plate. "Did something happen at school?" her mother finally asked. "No," Naomi lied. "Same as always." Vanessa leaned forward. "Naomi." "I said it's fine." A pause. "You know," Vanessa said carefully, "you don't have to keep pretending you're okay just to protect us." Naomi's fork froze midair. "Protect you? You and Dad are the ones hiding." Vanessa stiffened. "That's not fair. You said we shouldn't tell anyone about Dad, that it's safer, but now I'm the one getting hurt." Silence stretched across the table. Finally, Vanessa said, "Your father did what he had to do to keep us safe. That's never going to change." Naomi stood. Well, maybe it's time someone finally told the truth. That night, she pulled open the bottom drawer in the hallway where her father used to keep things. Vanessa never let her dig through it, but she did. Inside, a worn leather binder, dog tags, a Purple Heart medal, a newspaper clipping. Captain Marcus Carter exposes scandal in 2nd Battalion. Retaliation feared. Her breath caught. She turned the page and saw him, her father, in uniform. Stoic, strong, decorated. A combat veteran. Not the deadbeat kids said he was. Not the ghost she was told to forget. In that moment, Naomi didn't just feel anger. She felt power. A fire. They had bullied the wrong girl. They just didn't know it yet. The next morning, Naomi walked into school different. Not louder. Not dressed flashier, but different. Like she was holding something no one else could touch. She wore her hoodie zipped up, her backpack slung across one shoulder, and a quiet fire simmering behind her eyes. Brooklyn noticed it first. "She's smiling," she whispered to her friend Taylor as they passed Naomi by the lockers. "Like she knows something." Taylor snorted. Maybe she finally snapped. Naomi heard it, didn't flinch. She just opened her locker, now clean, paint scrubbed away, but the message still burned in memory. Know your place. Oh, she did now, and it wasn't where they thought. During second period, the teacher passed out group assignments. Naomi got paired with Brooklyn, Taylor, and Josh Wallace. The worst trio possible. Brooklyn groaned aloud. "Seriously?" Mrs. Lane smiled tightly. "Yes, seriously. Diversity is good for collaboration." Brooklyn rolled her eyes. "Right, as if she's gonna bring anything useful." Naomi sat down at the table and stared directly at her. "I will." Josh laughed under his breath. "This is gonna be fun." The assignment was to create a video presentation about unsung American heroes. Brooklyn pushed the packet toward Naomi. "You can do the boring part, research or whatever. I'll do the speaking. People actually listen to me." Naomi tilted her head. "You don't even know who we're doing it on." "Yes, I do. My great-uncle was a state senator. That counts." Naomi's voice was quiet, firm. "I have a better idea." Brooklyn smirked. "Of course you do." Naomi looked her dead in the eye. Captain Marcus Carter, U.S. Army, Silver Star, 2-time bronze recipient, served 4 tours overseas, exposed corruption in his own unit at personal risk, saved 3 civilians under fire. Brooklyn blinked. Naomi pulled out a small laminated photo from her backpack and placed it on the table. It was of a young black soldier, standing tall, uniform pressed, eyes steady. "My father." Taylor's mouth parted. Josh leaned in. "Wait, that's your dad?" Naomi said nothing, just watched the confusion flicker across Brooklyn's face. "He's, like, in the military?" Naomi nodded. "Was. Retired, officially. Still serves in ways you'll never understand." Brooklyn scoffed. "Whatever. Sounds made up." Naomi pulled her phone out, tapped a link, and turned it to them. A video started to play. News footage. "Captain Carter testifies before Congress." Naomi's last name was visible on the lower third banner. "Carter family faces retaliation." Brooklyn leaned back slowly, the smirk gone. "I didn't tell anyone," Naomi said softly. "Because we had to move. My dad's testimony made enemies. We've lived under the radar since. That's why I didn't say anything." Taylor's eyes shifted. "So you, had to leave everything because your dad did the right thing?" Naomi nodded. Josh looked uncomfortable now. "That's actually kind of intense." Brooklyn crossed her arms. "So what? You think just because your dad wore a uniform, you're better than everyone else? Naomi looked at her steady. No, I just know who I am now, and that scares you. The bell rang. Naomi stood and walked away, leaving the others in silence. But as she turned down the hall, her heart still raced, because telling the truth meant opening the door. At lunch, Naomi sat alone like usual, but something had shifted. A few students looked her way longer than before. Some whispered. Others scrolled on their phones. She knew exactly what they were looking at. The video she showed in class had somehow made it online. Fast. Her mom texted her during 6th period. We need to talk. Come straight home. Naomi walked into the apartment that afternoon and found her dad sitting in the living room. Hi, she said quietly. He stood up slowly, the stiffness in his joints showing. Combat had left marks. You told them, he said, not angry. Just knowing. I had to, she said. They were never going to stop. And I'm not ashamed of who you are. Marcus Carter nodded once, then walked over and held her shoulders. You shouldn't be ashamed, but this means things might move faster now. We always knew the truth would catch up with us. Vanessa entered from the kitchen. A local paper already called. Naomi stiffened. What? They saw the video. Someone shared it with a reporter. They want to run a story. It could expose where we live. Her father sighed. It's starting again. Naomi shook her head. No, it's ending. We've hidden long enough. Vanessa looked from her husband to her daughter. And what if they come after us again? Naomi stared at them both. Then I'll be ready this time. That night she didn't sleep. She sat at her desk, typing. The group project had changed. She wasn't going to just present facts. She was going to tell the story that no one had the courage to tell before. The story of a girl who was bullied, until they found out who her father really was, and how, even then, that wasn't the whole reason they should have respected her, because Naomi Carter had already proven she could stand up on her own, and now they were going to see it too. It started small, a few lingering stares in the hallway, whispers that stopped when Naomi passed by, and a sudden drop in the number of cruel notes shoved into her locker. But silence wasn't the same as respect. At lunch, instead of jeers, Naomi found herself alone, not because she was being excluded this time, but because no one knew how to look her in the eye anymore. Her truth had become too real, too uncomfortable. Brooklyn avoided her entirely. Taylor half smiled once, then quickly looked away. Josh had started watching her with something like guilt. But Naomi didn't want pity. She wanted clarity. And clarity came on a Thursday morning when Principal Hargrove's voice echoed through the school intercom. Naomi Carter, please report to the main office. Students turned their heads as she stood and walked toward the door. A few looked curious, others looked nervous. Naomi walked with purpose, her hoodie unzipped for the first time, revealing a plain black t-shirt and the military dog tag she hadn't worn in public for months. The secretary smiled politely but didn't make eye contact as she gestured toward the principal's office. Naomi stepped inside. Principal Hargrove, a graying man with sharp features and a reputation for being fair but firm, sat behind his desk. Across from him was a woman in a crisp navy suit, mid-40s, short hair, no-nonsense expression. Government. Naomi froze. Miss Carter, Hargrove said, please have a seat. The woman extended her hand. Agent Denise Langley, Department of Veterans Affairs. Your father's name came up this morning. I believe you know why. Naomi nodded cautiously. The video, Langley nodded. Yes, it sparked renewed attention on a case we thought was buried. People are asking questions again about the retaliation, the threats, the cover-up. Principal Hargrove cleared his throat. Is your family safe, Naomi? I think so. For now, Langley leaned forward. I'm not here to scare you. Quite the opposite. I'm here because what you did, speaking out, it opened doors. It reminded people of the kind of man Marcus Carter is, and it reminded some others of the kind of men who try to silence him. Naomi said nothing. Her pulse was racing. We need your help, Langley continued. Your father has always refused to talk to the press since retiring, but with your story, we believe he might finally have leverage. The VA wants to reopen the investigation into the reprisals he faced, but we need his voice, and yours. Naomi blinked. Me? You lived through it. You saw what it did to your family. You've already become a symbol, whether you like it or not. Hargrove added quietly, and your classmates, some of them have been watching, learning. Naomi sat back in the chair. The room felt small. I just wanted to stop the bullying, she whispered. Langley nodded. And you did. But you did more than that. You exposed a truth people wanted buried. Naomi walked home that day in a daze, her mind heavy with everything Langley had said. She found her dad on the back porch, a worn paperback in his hands, eyes scanning the pages like always. Dad, she said softly. He looked up. They came, didn't they? She nodded. They want to reopen the case. Marcus exhaled slowly, his face unreadable. They'll want me to relive every detail, everything I fought to forget. They said you might finally have leverage. A silence settled between them, thick with memory. Then he said, You gave them that. By speaking out. You did what I couldn't. Naomi knelt in front of him. You protected us. You didn't fail. But I'm not a kid anymore. And if there's a way to make sure this never happens to another soldier or another daughter, Marcus touched her cheek gently. You're stronger than I ever was. Naomi smiled faintly. I had to be. That weekend, Naomi sat down to write her portion of the group presentation. She scrapped everything they'd done so far. She started fresh. Title: The Cost of Integrity, A Daughter's Perspective. She told the story of her father, not just as a soldier, but as a man who stood alone when doing the right thing meant losing everything. She wrote about moving constantly, watching her mom sleep by the front door during the worst weeks, seeing fear behind her father's calm, and then, finally, watching them rebuild. Her words were raw, real. She didn't write it to impress anyone. She wrote it because she had to. The day they presented, the classroom was full. Word had spread. Teachers from other classes showed up. Even Mrs. Lane looked nervous as she dimmed the lights. Brooklyn fumbled her intro awkwardly, clearly unprepared to follow Naomi's script. But when Naomi stood up and walked to the projector, something shifted. She stood tall, voice steady, eyes locked on the crowd. My name is Naomi Carter. Today I'm going to tell you a story about what it means to live in the shadow of courage. And for the next 10 minutes, no one made a sound, not even Brooklyn. After the bell rang, the students lingered. Some clapped softly. A few came up to shake her hand, and one, Josh, simply said, I'm sorry. Naomi didn't reply. She didn't need to, because for the first time since she stepped into this school, she wasn't invisible. She was undeniable. The buzz began before Naomi even stepped into school Monday morning. Over the weekend, her presentation had gone viral. Someone had filmed it on their phone, uploaded it with the title, Daughter of Decorated Vet Speaks Truth to Bullying, and the video had exploded across social media. The views were climbing fast. Teachers were sharing it. Military forums had picked it up, and so had the local news. When Naomi arrived at Jefferson High, everything felt different. The usual whispers were there, but they'd changed. She's the one from the video. I didn't know her dad was that Marcus Carter. She's the reason the VA's reopening that case. Students didn't look through her anymore. They looked at her, not with malice, but with curiosity, some with respect, a few with guilt. Brooklyn didn't speak to her at all. In second period, Mrs. Lane pulled her aside before class. "Naomi, I just wanted to say that was one of the most honest, powerful things I've ever seen, and I'm sorry if I ever made you feel unheard." Naomi managed a tight smile. "Thanks, Mrs. Lane." But just as she thought the tides might be turning, an unexpected storm rolled in. That afternoon, Naomi was called to the counselor's office. Again, but this time it wasn't about her. It was about her father. Mr. Hawthorne, the school counselor, looked uncomfortable as he tapped his pen on the desk. "Naomi, I received a call this morning. Someone submitted an anonymous complaint questioning the credibility of your presentation." Naomi's shoulders stiffened. "Excuse me? They're claiming you fabricated parts of it, that your father was never targeted by military higher-ups, that this is just an emotional story with no verifiable facts." Her heart sank. "That's a lie." "I know, but the district is now being contacted by an organization that claims to represent military honor and integrity. They're asking for a review of what was presented." She felt like the floor dropped from under her. "They want to discredit him," she whispered. "I'm afraid so. And by extension, you." That night, Naomi sat at the kitchen table, the house dimly lit, her laptop open to a series of aggressive emails and comments. Most were supportive, but some were brutal. Lies, propaganda, exploitation. Marcus sat across from her, reading the screen quietly. He didn't flinch. "They don't scare me," Naomi said. "They don't have to," he replied. "That's the thing about smear campaigns. They're meant to confuse everyone else." She looked up at him, suddenly angry. "So we just let them twist it?" Marcus leaned back, eyes focused. "No, we respond, but not with rage. With truth." The next morning, he accompanied Naomi to school. Word spread quickly. Marcus Carter, in person. Decorated veteran. Survivor of the Helmand ambush. The man in the grainy photo now stood in the school lobby. Principal Hargrove invited him into the main office, along with a few district representatives who had come for a surprise review of Naomi's claims. It was supposed to be intimidating. But Marcus sat calmly, military ID and paperwork in hand, voice steady as he laid down documents, awards, discharge notes, and one heavily redacted internal memo from the Pentagon. Naomi watched from the corner of the room as the officials flipped through the pages, the doubt slowly draining from their faces. One of them finally asked, "Why didn't you release this earlier?" Marcus answered plainly, "Because I didn't owe it to anyone, until now." He turned to Naomi. "But she deserves the truth. She earned it." Later that afternoon, back in the hallway, Brooklyn finally approached her. For the first time, she didn't look smug. She looked small. "I didn't mean for all this to happen," Brooklyn muttered. "I didn't know who your dad was." Naomi stared at her. "Why would that have changed anything?" Brooklyn blinked. I guess it wouldn't, but you bullied me when you thought I was nobody. And now that you think I'm somebody, you feel bad." Brooklyn's mouth opened, then closed again. Naomi shook her head. "You're not sorry. You're just scared people finally see you." She walked away, her spine straight, the whispers behind her a dull buzz. But when she turned the corner near her locker, she stopped short. There was a group of kids waiting. Josh, a few from the basketball team, even 2 freshmen she barely knew. "Hey," Josh said, stepping forward. "Some of us are organizing a school-wide assembly, not the teachers, us, students. We want to talk about what happened, what we've ignored." Naomi was stunned. "You want me to speak?" Josh nodded. "You already did. We just want to make sure more people hear it." For the first time since the chaos began, Naomi felt a ripple of hope rise through her chest. Maybe this was how change started, not with yelling, but with listening. Then action. She gave a small nod. "Let's do it." Naomi stood behind the curtain, her palms slick with sweat, despite the cool auditorium air. The room beyond the velvet divider buzzed with a low hum of voices. Students, teachers, even a few parents had shown up. Josh and the student council had pulled off the impossible, organizing a school-wide assembly to talk about bullying and discrimination. But Naomi wasn't just here to listen. She was the first speaker. Backstage, Marcus adjusted the collar of her blouse, just like he used to do when she had piano recitals as a kid. "You nervous?" he asked. She gave a shaky smile. "Only slightly more than the time I gave a book report on To Kill a Mockingbird in front of 3 bored 7th graders. He chuckled, then grew serious. "You know, this isn't just about them hearing you. It's about you taking control of your story, not theirs." She nodded. Then Principal Hargrove stepped out, microphone in hand, and announced, "We're proud to open this student-led forum with a voice that has already moved so many, Naomi Carter." Applause echoed as she walked to center stage. The spotlight was blinding for a moment, but once her eyes adjusted, she could see the rows of faces, curious, cautious, open. She took a breath. "I used to think staying quiet was the safest way to survive school," she began. "I thought if I shrank myself small enough, maybe I'd be invisible. Maybe the names, the stares, the jokes would stop." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "But I was wrong." She told them about the lunchroom, about Brooklyn's snide comments, the classmates who looked away, the teachers who never noticed. She told them how exhausting it was to feel like you had to prove your worth just to be left alone. "But I'm not here just to talk about the hurt. I'm here because my father taught me what courage looks like. Not the kind you see in war movies. The kind that shows up when no one else does. The kind that stands tall, even when it's shaking inside." From the side of the stage, Marcus watched his daughter speak, her voice steady, her presence commanding. He saw in her the same fire he'd carried through tours overseas, except hers burned through shame and silence. When she finished, the room was quiet for a second too long. Then came the applause. Not polite claps, real ones, a standing ovation. Even Brooklyn, seated in the back row, stood with the others, though her arms were crossed tightly and her eyes never met Naomi's. But just when things seemed to reach a turning point, the twist hit. The next day, Naomi's locker was defaced. Black marker scrawled across the metal. "Liar." Underneath, in crude block letters, "Daddy's medal can't buy truth." The hallway froze. It wasn't just cruel, it was coordinated. Phones were out instantly. Some students gasped, others looked away again, caught in their cowardice. Naomi stared at it, jaw clenched, refusing to let them see her cry. Josh stormed down the hall. "This is insane. We're reporting this right now." She grabbed his arm. "No. Not yet." He looked at her like she was out of her mind. "Naomi, I need to know who did it." That afternoon, security footage revealed the truth. Brooklyn hadn't acted alone. She had help. Paige and Lauren, her usual crew. But the shock came from who else was on the tape. Mr. Whitaker, the assistant football coach. He wasn't caught writing on the locker, but he was seen handing the girls the master key to open it. A teacher had enabled them. Principal Hargrove stared at the footage, stunned. This can't be real." Marcus sat silently beside Naomi as they played it back. He wasn't surprised. "There's always one behind the curtain," he said coldly. Bullies don't organize themselves without a whisper in their ear. The school board was immediately involved. Mr. Whitaker was suspended pending investigation, and the three girls were removed from school for the week. But the damage had already been done. Naomi couldn't sleep that night. The words on her locker burned in her mind, louder than any cheer from the assembly. The next morning, she stood in front of her locker again. The janitors had scrubbed the marker off, but the outline still faintly showed under the glare of fluorescent lights. Instead of walking away, she took out a Sharpie from her backpack and wrote over it. Truth is louder. By lunch, a crowd had gathered. Students began writing their own messages on paper, taping them up around her locker. You're not alone. We see you. Truth matters. Brooklyn passed by, eyes flicking across the scene, but this time she didn't smirk. She looked like someone who had just realized the power she used to wield had been ripped away. That afternoon, Naomi found herself once again on the school's internal news broadcast. Only this time she was sitting across from the student anchors, being asked not to defend herself, but to speak about leadership, resilience, and what students could do better. When the segment aired, Marcus watched from the living room, arms folded, eyes wet. You said you were nervous, he murmured. Naomi smiled at the screen. Guess I lied. The story was no longer just about a bullied girl. It was about a school waking up. And that was only the beginning. Naomi sat quietly in the back of the school board hearing room, her hands resting on her lap, fingers clenched together. Her mother, Denise, sat beside her, gently squeezing her hand from time to time. Marcus stood at the back wall, arms crossed over his chest like a watchman, his expression carved from stone. They were here to witness the outcome of what had boiled beneath the surface for too long. The footage of Coach Whitaker had sent shockwaves through the school district. But what came next stunned everyone. An anonymous tip had been sent to the board. Emails, screenshots, even voice memos. They revealed that Coach Whitaker wasn't just enabling the bullying. He had been actively encouraging it. He had been heard saying things like, "That girl needs to be reminded of her place," and "No one likes a little hero's kid acting like she runs the place." When those words were played aloud in the hearing, Naomi felt a strange mix of disgust and vindication rise in her throat. The board members exchanged glances, their discomfort visible. Marcus leaned toward the superintendent and said, "This isn't just about a teacher who crossed the line. It's about a culture you allowed to grow." A long pause followed. Then Superintendent Moore cleared his throat. "Mr. Whitaker has been terminated, effective immediately, and a formal review of our staff training and code of conduct will begin this week." Naomi exhaled, but the satisfaction was short-lived. Brooklyn's mother stood up in the gallery. "So what? That's it? My daughter gets humiliated on the news, suspended, and now this girl is a hero." Marcus didn't flinch. "Your daughter humiliated herself. Actions have consequences." The room went quiet again. After the hearing, Naomi and her parents walked to the car. As they reached the lot, someone called out from behind. It was Brooklyn. But she wasn't alone. Paige and Lauren trailed awkwardly behind her, avoiding eye contact. Naomi turned slowly. Brooklyn looked different, not just in her face, but in how she carried herself, like the weight of everything had finally settled on her shoulders. "I owe you an apology," she said flatly. "Not just for what I did, for everything." Naomi raised a brow. "You mean for calling me names, mocking my dad, trashing my locker, and acting like I didn't exist unless it was to tear me down?" Brooklyn nodded. "Yeah, all of it." Paige added, "We weren't just being mean. We were following his lead. Whitaker made us feel like we were doing what was right." Naomi studied them. "It was never right. You just finally got caught." Brooklyn winced but nodded. I get that. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to say it. Marcus walked forward then. He looked directly at Brooklyn and said, "Let me ask you something. If she wasn't my daughter, if she was just some quiet girl with no dad in the military, would you still be here apologizing?" Brooklyn hesitated. "Maybe not, but I hope I would have eventually." "Then start proving it," Marcus said, his voice firm. "Not to us, to yourself." Brooklyn looked at Naomi. "I'm joining the Diversity Council, voluntarily." Naomi blinked, surprised. "Seriously?" "Yeah, someone needs to help change things, and I figured maybe that someone should be someone who helped break it." It wasn't a full redemption, but it was a start. Later that evening, Naomi sat in her room, scrolling through messages from students she barely knew. "Thank you for standing up. I didn't know how to before. My little brother's in 8th grade, and he said you're his hero now. I never said anything, but I was bullied too. Seeing you fight back gave me hope." Tears welled in her eyes. Downstairs, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, flipping through a manila envelope. Inside were copies of his medals, a letter from the Pentagon, and a photo of his squad in Kandahar. On the back, written in fading ink, were the words, "We fight so they don't have to." He looked up as Naomi walked in. "You did good, baby girl," he said. "I'm not done yet," she replied. "I've been thinking. Maybe we should host a town forum, not just school staff and students, parents, community leaders, everyone." Marcus smiled. "You're talking about systemic change now. I'm tired of patches. I want something real." That weekend, Naomi stood in front of her computer, recording a video. "Hi, I'm Naomi Carter," she began. "You might have heard about what happened at my school. You might have even seen some of the news coverage. But what you probably haven't heard is what comes after, what change really looks like." She spoke for 5 minutes, clearly, emotionally, powerfully. By Monday, the video had over 30 raw views. The story was no longer just local. News outlets reached out. Advocacy groups offered support. A national education podcast featured her. And Brooklyn? She showed up to the Diversity Council's first meeting with a notebook full of ideas and quietly took a seat at the back. Not to lead, to learn. Something had shifted, not everything. Not yet. But enough to prove that when one girl stood up, a whole system had to pay attention. The wind tugged at Naomi's braids as she stepped onto the auditorium stage, gripping the sides of the podium a little too tightly. The gym was packed, not just with students, but with teachers, parents, community members, even local reporters perched in the back row. She'd never stood in front of this many people before. Not like this. Not to speak, but now all eyes were on her. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice wavering for only a second before it leveled out. "My name is Naomi Carter. You might know me as the girl who got bullied. But today I hope you see me differently." Murmurs swept across the gym. Naomi looked up and locked eyes with her father, seated proudly in the front row. His steady gaze grounded her. "I want to talk about what happened at Jefferson High, about what's still happening in schools like ours all over the country. This isn't just about bullies. It's about the systems that allow them to thrive. It's about silence, about people looking away." She paused. The quiet in the gym grew heavier. "For too long, I kept my head down. I thought being quiet made me strong, but silence doesn't protect you. It isolates you, and sometimes it lets injustice grow." The crowd was still. No coughs, no whispers, just a collective stillness hanging on every word. Naomi pressed on. "My father is a combat veteran. He served this country with honor. But when kids mocked me for the color of my skin, when they tore my books, shoved me in the hallway, called me names, none of that mattered. Not to them. Because hate doesn't care who your parents are. There were gasps now. Faces shifted. Some teachers stared at their hands. A few students bowed their heads. But here's the twist, Naomi said. The twist is, I'm not here to make anyone feel guilty. I'm here to ask what we're going to do next. And just like that, she flipped the script. Behind her, the giant screen lit up, displaying photos from her campaign. Meetings with the Diversity Council, restorative justice circles forming on campus, anonymous student testimonies of bullying being addressed. It was no longer just a story. It was a movement. Principal Hayes stood near the back, arms crossed, nodding slowly. Even he looked humbled. After the speech, as applause rose and swelled, Marcus stood up, clapping hard, his eyes wet. Naomi stepped down from the stage and made her way to him. They embraced briefly, tightly. No words needed. But the drama wasn't over. As the crowd began to exit, a commotion erupted near the side doors. A man in a gray blazer burst in, holding up a folder. "I have something to say." It was Mr. Raymond Cook, Brooklyn's father, a prominent lawyer and one of the school's wealthiest donors. "Mr. Cook," Principal Hayes started, but Naomi raised her hand. "No," she said. "Let him speak." Raymond's face was flushed. "My daughter was publicly humiliated. This school let my family be dragged in the media. And now you're parading this narrative like it's gospel." Naomi didn't flinch. "Mr. Cook," she replied calmly, "your daughter mocked me, vandalized my locker, lied to faculty, and let someone else take the fall for it. She made her own narrative." He stepped forward. "You think standing on stage with a sob story gives you the moral high ground?" That's when Marcus stood. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just walked up beside his daughter and said, "Sir, I fought in Fallujah and Kandahar. I've lost friends, brothers, so that people like you could have the freedom to speak nonsense like this. But what you will not do is try to bully my daughter one more time." Raymond's mouth opened, then closed. The room was still again. Then, to everyone's shock, Brooklyn stepped from the crowd. "Dad," she said, her voice firm. "Stop." He turned. "What did you say?" "I said stop. Naomi's not the villain here. You think your money can protect us from consequences, but it won't. Not anymore. I was wrong. So were you." The silence that followed was painful, raw. Raymond looked at her, stunned. "We'll talk about this at home." Brooklyn shook her head. "No, we'll talk about it right here." A slow ripple of applause began, from the students, then some of the parents. Naomi watched as Brooklyn turned back to her and nodded. After the crowd dispersed, Marcus and Naomi stood under the setting sun near the parking lot. "You handled yourself like a soldier up there," he said, pride glowing in his voice. "I'm not a soldier," she said, glancing at the horizon. "I'm something different." Marcus raised a brow. "I'm a builder. I don't want to fight forever. I want to build something better." He smiled. "Then you've already won more battles than most." That night, Naomi posted a clip from her speech online. It was shared over 50,000 times in a single day. People weren't just listening anymore. They were acting. The wind that rushed through the Jefferson High courtyard carried a different energy now, lighter, almost expectant. Naomi stood near the school's new mural, her fingers tracing the fresh paint. The design was bold, hands of all colors intertwined in a circle, with the words "Rise Together" across the top. It had been her idea. A senior project born out of chaos, now turned into something lasting. She exhaled slowly. So much had changed. The suspension hearings were held 2 days after her speech. Brooklyn had walked into the room with her head high, admitting to every detail. The mockery, the locker incident, the false accusations. Her honesty shocked everyone, even Principal Hayes. But it wasn't a tactic, it was real, and because of that, Naomi asked for leniency. She told the truth, Naomi had said. That matters. It has to matter. Instead of expulsion, Brooklyn was assigned community service, working alongside Naomi on the school's peer mentorship program. They weren't friends yet, but they weren't enemies anymore. That was something. Mr. Raymond Cook didn't take it well. He threatened legal action, tried to withdraw funding from the school, but the board pushed back this time, bolstered by public support and national attention. He went quiet after that, or maybe he just realized his power wasn't as absolute as he thought. As for Naomi, her video had gone viral. Not just the speech, but clips of her standing up to bullies, footage of her dad calmly shutting down Raymond, and later interviews she gave about creating safer schools. She was invited to speak at other high schools, even a local city council forum. Her story sparked a broader conversation about racism, bullying, and who gets to feel safe in public spaces. But there was still one place she hadn't returned to, the old hallway, near her freshman locker. She found herself walking there that afternoon, the halls mostly quiet, the same tile, the same flickering light above the stairwell, and for a second she was 14 again, books scattered, laughter behind her, and shame heavy on her shoulders. Then she blinked. Now she was taller, stronger, wearing a hoodie that read "Daughter of a Veteran" in bold letters, and standing across from her was Principal Hayes. "I owe you more than an apology," he said, stepping closer. "I failed you. For too long I believed the myth of neutrality, that saying nothing was better than saying the wrong thing. But silence is where injustice grows. I see that now." Naomi nodded, not with anger, but with a quiet understanding. "I don't need perfection, sir," she replied. "Just effort. Real effort." He smiled, the lines on his face softening. "You've made me a better principal, Naomi, and a better man." As they walked out together, a group of younger students passed by. One of them, a small boy with tight curls and wide eyes, looked up at Naomi and whispered, "That's her. That's the girl from the video." She turned, crouched to his level. "You doing okay here?" she asked gently. He nodded. "Better now." Later that evening, Naomi and her father sat in their small but warm living room, a pizza box open on the table, laughter bouncing off the walls. Marcus had hung up his medals on a shelf above the fireplace, a quiet acknowledgement of his past. And next to them, a new frame, a screenshot of Naomi's speech, frozen mid-sentence, eyes fierce and hopeful. "You proud of me, Dad?" she asked, leaning back. "More than proud," he said, his voice soft. "You didn't just survive, Naomi. You transformed." She smiled. "I think I'm just getting started." The doorbell rang. It was Brooklyn. She stood awkwardly on the porch, holding a plastic tub of cookies and a thick folder. "I figured we could start planning the mentorship program, if you're still in." Naomi stepped aside, gesturing her in. "Let's build it right." As the night deepened, the girls talked ideas and laughed over the disaster of their first meeting. Forgiveness was a process, but it had begun. Outside, the Jefferson community was changing. Slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. New policies were introduced at the school, guided by students. Diversity training became mandatory. A student-led equity council was formed. Naomi didn't lead everything. She didn't need to. She'd sparked the change, and that was enough. In her final school newsletter column before graduation, Naomi wrote, "Justice isn't about revenge. It's about rebuilding the world so others don't fall the way you did. If you have a voice, use it. If you see injustice, name it. And if you're scared, remember, courage doesn't come from feeling safe. It comes from doing what's right, even when you're afraid. She closed the tab, hit send, and leaned back in her chair. Across the room, her father raised a glass of lemonade. "To the builder," he said. "To the future," she replied. "If this story moved you, if you believe every child deserves to feel safe, seen, and valued, subscribe to our channel for more powerful, real-life inspired stories. Drop a comment, share your thoughts, and let's keep the conversation going. Because justice starts with being heard, and sometimes the quietest voice becomes the loudest change.